Greetings. Just give me a couple of minutes. Just checking some things out. Okay, and for the viewers who are tuned in already, can you check the chat? Do you see the 3 documents we posted on the chat? You can send a message. Let me know if you can. Let me know if you can hear me good, and let me know if you can see those 3 documents we posted. Somebody just send a message real quick. The documents that we have posted are the nhoma document, the Afuraitkaitnit Whole Life Interventions document, and a link to the excerpts from the nhoma journal. So send me a message. Somebody just send a message saying that you can hear me clearly. Okay, good. And can you all, do you see the links that we posted? In order for you to post, you have to log into USTREAM. Okay, cool. All right. So Michiamo, my name is Kwesi Radnehembutaya Khan. This is our first broadcast for Sankofadwuma, and what we're doing is this is a presentation, a workshop that we typically conduct with human service professionals, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Black human service professionals, therapists, psychologists, case managers, community support workers, people in the field of human services, as well as teachers, parents, schools, cultural organizations, independent charter schools, as well as other schools that allow us in to talk to our children into the community. So it fits a wide variety of organizations. It's about getting our people to recognize the value of culture in our wellness, physiological wellness, physical wellness, as well as spiritual or cultural wellness. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the majority of the workshop that we typically conduct. We typically conduct the workshop about 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours. We go through the 3 documents that are posted. The nhoma document, and you can download these so you can follow along as we go through each document. The nhoma document, principled adaptability, individual treatment plans in the cultural spiritual domain. The Afuraitkaitnit document, the whole life interventions document. You should be able to download that. And then we also have our journal, nhoma Whole Life Journal. This is the first issue. What we have linked is a link to the website and excerpts from the journal. We have a electronic version of the journal. We also have a hard copy version. You can order those directly from the website. The link is there, but there are excerpts, and we're going to go over the excerpts just to show how we use this journal. We published this journal specifically for human service professionals, as well as teachers, parents, and so forth in our community to help with our clients, with our consumers, with our students, with our children, and so forth. So first, let's get into the first document. Now, this is the first document in nhoma, principled adaptability, individual treatment plans in the cultural spiritual domain. And we're just going to we're going to go through point by point all the information in the documents, all 3 documents, and show you how you can conduct interventions using the journal and using the Afuraitkaitnit Whole Life Interventions model, how you can conduct effective interventions affecting skill building, just a variety of issues to enhance the physical and spiritual wellness from the center of culture for our community, whether it's young children all the way to elders, people with so-called Axis 1 diagnoses, as well as people who have not been quote-unquote diagnosed but are having various issues. And some people, they haven't been quote-unquote diagnosed but our people, we have different issues that are causing us to engage in self-destructive behavior, and it is only through culture, embracing our innately held culture, where we can grasp the values necessary to reconstruct our behavior to something that's constructive as opposed to self-destructive. So we're going to go through this document first. You can read along, and we'll explain the concepts as we go. All right. So in Chinchin first, this Adekyere symbol. Adekyere symbols come from the Akan people of Ghana, West Afuraitkaitnit, West Africa, as well as Ivory Coast in West Afuraitkaitnit, West Africa. The Akan are the largest group in Ghana and Ivory Coast. Collectively, there are about 20 million Akan people on the continent. They're one of the largest ethnic groups on the continent, as well as in the western part of the continent. There are millions of Akan people who were taken during the enslavement process and brought to North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe. So there are many black people in America who are actually directly descended from the Akan ethnic group because they were one of the largest groups. So when we use these symbols are very ancient. They're thousands of years old. The Akan people use symbols to convey knowledge, to transfer knowledge from generation to generation. Each symbol, it has a name, but it also has an ebe, or a proverb, associated with it. So when you see the symbol, then you automatically think of the proverb. Now, we use symbols every day. We use symbols, people use symbols on us every day, and we are programmed with the symbols. So for example, if somebody sees on the side of a building a red circle with a dot in the middle, we automatically think about, well, that must be Target. Now, it's a red circle with a dot in the middle, but because we have been programmed to associate that with the store Target, that just shows that the symbol has been programmed into our consciousness. If you see a cross, a perpendicular line and a horizontal line, we automatically associate that, whether it's children or adults, we automatically associate a perpendicular line and a horizontal line with Christianity, with some form of quote-unquote religion. That's because we have been programmed to see two lines, and we automatically have a thought because that has been programmed into our psyche, programmed into our spirit. So symbols are powerful. Images are powerful. We have always used symbols to program ourselves positively with truthful information that can help us in our day-to-day lives. So in fact, the symbols I have on right here, this necklace, these are Adekyere symbols as well. They're in brass, but there are hundreds of Adekyere symbols. These are a couple of them. So we use symbols to positively indoctrinate, in a positive sense, our values of our culture, to guide our behavior, help us navigate through the twists and turns of life with skill. So, in fact, this symbol right here, Nchin, when you see the symbol, now the proverb associated with Nchin means, and it says, Obra Kwan Ye Nchin. Life's road is full of twists and turns. We must learn to adapt. And this is a fitting symbol for our process, for our teaching, because when we come in contact with what people will call clients or consumers, whether it's children, people in foster care, children in foster care, adults in foster care, people who are going through all kinds of situations. If you're a community support worker, a case manager, a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, people have a number of issues. It's about the changes of life that they're trying to grapple with in a positive and self-affirming fashion. So the reality is that Nchin conveys life's road is full of twists and turns. Chin means like a zigzag or a bent line. It's like, in a sense, it's kind of like a snake moving back and forth. And it's showing that life's road is full of twists and turns. That's the reality. There's no changing that. So therefore, it's implied that we must learn to adapt, since life is going to give us obstacles, or what we could consider obstacles, but if we learn how to adapt, they're not obstacles, they're just changes. If we understand that, then we understand life. Now, we we learn to adapt to things. People adapt by when they're hit with a life change. They adapt by sometimes self-medicating. That's self-destructive. They're poisoning themselves. Drinking alcohol, doing drugs, smoking marijuana, smoking cigarettes, doing crack, heroin, cocaine, things like that. That's adapting, but it's not a principled adaptation. It's a self-destructive adaptation. In our culture, we deal with principled adaptability. So we're going to look at the first paragraph. It says the introduction of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, which means African black culture, to Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people as a core transmission of inheritance illuminates our unique approach as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African or black people, to wellness from a holistic or whole life perspective. We underscore a core transmission of inheritance because our values, our culture, it's innately held, it's intrinsic to our nature. We have a culture that's wired into us, into our spirits, into our DNA, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African or black people. So it's a transmission of inheritance. Okay? And it's a whole life perspective. When Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit, meaning Africans or black people, become rooted in our culture, which means the knowledge of who we are and the intelligence, resilience, and greatness of our ancestresses and ancestors, we become grounded. We have a proper sense of who we have been over thousands of years and what we are capable of. We gain insight into the reality that we have a purpose or function in the world and insight into how we must operate in order to fulfill this purpose, to fully execute this function. So in our culture, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African people, black people, we understand that we have a function, we have a purpose. Just like every cell in your body executes a certain function, they are designed and came into being to execute a specific function in your body. Your heart cells serve heart functions, and therefore when they do so, they serve the body. Your liver cells are designed to execute liver functions, and when they do so, they serve the entire body. Each organ has a form and a function that when it executes that function, it supports the whole organism. Their function is their life's purpose. We as cells in our culture, black people, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit culture, we are cells in the great divine body of the Supreme Being, so we have a specific function to execute in this created world. When we understand our function, that means we have a purpose. And when we have a purpose or a life focus, that determines our value. Many of our people think that we don't have a culture. If you ask a black person, what's your culture? They say, well, I'm just black. Now, if somebody from another country comes over here, they can point out the fact that, oh, they have a culture. They have a language, they have a certain way they dress, they eat certain kinds of food prepared in certain ways, they have a certain kind of approach to different aspects of life, they have a certain way that they raise their children. They have a culture. And they can point to every other group and say, well, they have a culture. Then when we look at ourselves, and you say, what is your culture? They say, well, I don't have a culture, we're just black. Now, it's not true, but we've been conditioned with that foolishness since enslavement. The purpose of enslavement was to breed out the knowledge of our culture so that then we would become zombies, so we would just imitate the culture of the enslaver. And the enslaver just wanted us to have a culture of obedience. So once we understand what our true culture is, then we reject that culture of obedience. That's a rejection of self-destructive behavior, and it's the embrace of constructive behavior. If you understand your culture, that means you understand your life focus. That means you understand your function, why you're actually in the world. If you know that you actually have a purpose in the world, that's motivational. That's the only thing that's truly motivational. So that's why we say in the next line, such insight into the fact that you have a function is motivational, for it establishes for the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African black individual the truth about his or her inherent value. When the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individual embraces his or her inherent value or self-worth, he or she is inclined towards constructive behavior and disinclined towards self-destructive behavior. Such an individual has empowered himself or herself to recognize and effectively adapt to the inchin-chin, the twists and turns of life, with navigational skill, culture thus becomes the anchor for wellness, and again, that's principled adaptability. Now, first, let's deal with identity briefly, and we go into more of it in the nhoma in the journal. But for example, and we're talking about identity and how that's related to culture. We just use the term Afuraitkaitnit for the term Africa. Now, in English, we'll use the term Africa. We know what that means in African, and Africans, we know what that means. And then people say African American and so forth. Africa is a European corruption of an ancient term. The term Africa did not come from Europeans. It did not come from Romans. It didn't come from Arabs. It didn't come from Hindus. It didn't come from anybody outside of our people. Now, when you study the etymology or the root of the term, the origins of the term, it comes directly from our ancestresses and ancestors. Over 40,000 years ago, we were using the proper terms to define ourselves. Before any other people existed on the planet, when we were here, we are the first people who were created, and the only people that were created on this planet. We've been here for millions of years. We did not evolve from apes. We've been here for millions of years as human beings. So when we use terms to describe ourselves and the landmass and ourselves in relation to the landmass, we call the landmass not Afrika, but Afuraitkaitnit. That's the masculine title, and Afuraitkaitnit, which is the feminine title. So let's deal with the term Ka. Ka means a raised land or a high land, like a hill or a mountain. Ka is the masculine way of saying it. Kayet is the feminine aspect of it. Now, Ra means the creator. Ra'et means the creatress. So in our cosmology, which is borne out through the study of geology, for thousands of years, we understood that the primordial earth was covered entirely by water. Today, about 71% of the earth is covered by water. Only about 29% of the earth's landmass, the surface, is land. The other 71% is water. Before that landmass rose up, the entire planet was covered by water. So because of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions on the ocean floor at the formation of the planet Earth and the formation of the Earth's surface, those eruptions cause earthquakes and cause a portion of the ocean floor to surge upward above the surface of the water. And that first raised land by our ancestresses and ancestors was called Ka, masculine, and Kayet, feminine. And even in our languages today, different variations of the term Ka or Kayet or Kat you can find across the continent of Afuraitkaitnit, Africa, meaning a hill, a mountain, a raised land, and so forth. So that's the Ka and the Kayet. Ra and Ra'et are the creator, creatress, and we understood that it was the creator, the creatress, the great spirit who caused the rising up of that landmass. One of the titles of Ra and Ra'et are Afura and Afuraiet. So the Ka of Afura is the land of Afura, or land of the creator. The Kayet of Afuraiet, that's the feminine term, the land of the creatress. So Afuraka means the land of the creator. Afuraitkaitnit means the land of the creatress. So basically it just means the divine land, the original land. And the people, Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit, feminine, are the people of the original land, the original people, the divine children of the creator and the creatress and the original land. And the plural is Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit. So instead of saying Africa, we use Afuraka, the land Ka of Afura, or Afuraitkait, the land Kayet of Afuraiet, the divine land. And instead of saying African, we say Afurakani, which means the children or child of the divine creative spirit, child of the original land, descendant of the original people. So that gives us our identity. It connects us to the original landmass, connects us to the original people, the only people ever created in the world, because we were created millions of years ago, and we began to reproduce, of course, and then we migrated from Afuraitkaitnit to other parts of the world. Originally, when you look in science, you'll see that they call it the original continent a supercontinent, and often they will call it Pangaea or Pangaea, and because of plate tectonics and so forth, the continents separated from this one super landmass. And you'll see, even if you look on a map, that, or look on a globe, you'll find that the different continents actually piece together when you look at it holistically. That original landmass was in the region of Afuraitkaitnit. The other continental plates broke off from that center landmass, that center continent, and it's still in the place that it is right now. It's the heartland. In fact, when you look at it right side up, it's shaped like a human heart, because it is the heartland. So our first ancestresses and ancestors came into being or fashioned from that original landmass, and we're directly descendant from them. So that connects us to the original landmass, that connects us to the creator, the creatress. That gives us part of our identity. Okay, so that's just one piece. Let's go to the next page. Okay, so we get into the part that says individual treatment plans and the cultural spiritual domain. So individual treatment plans are used by Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, black psychiatrists, therapists, social workers, psychologists, case managers, community support workers, and educators within many human service agencies, educational and medical institutions. There's one domain that is greatly underutilized, which is the cultural spiritual domain. So you have treatment plans, you work with your consumers, work with your clients, whether they're children or adults, and you have to draft a treatment plan. You're working with the client to see the things that they need to work on. Of course, you're not supposed to just establish a plan for them. It's an interactive process. They need to buy into the process. There are many domains. Of course, there are psychiatric behavioral domains. There are housing and educational and vocational and emotional, or dealing with therapy, self-determination. Different groups, institutions have their own version of treatment plans. But when you've seen a treatment plan, you know there are various domains. At some point, you get to a domain option, which is all called the spiritual domain, cultural spiritual domain, cultural domain, and so forth. Very often with our people, when you get to that domain, if it says cultural, or it says cultural spiritual, or it says spiritual, and we look into that and we query the consumer or the client about that, their first response is, oh, well, I don't need that. If it says spiritual, they say, oh, well, I don't need to work on that. I already go to church. Or they don't want to have anything to do with it because they think it has something to do with the church, has something to do with Islam or something, or that you're trying to force them into some spiritual path or something like that. And of course, that's not our role to force them into some quote-unquote religious organization. But when they see the term, if they see something that says spiritual, that's the first thing they think, and they often reject it. Or they say, oh, I don't need it because I'm already involved in something spiritual. So we have to explain what does cultural spiritual actually mean. And again, like we said in the beginning, if it says cultural, we automatically, when we hear the term culture, that we believe that has nothing to do with us. So we're like, well, I don't need to work on that. What does that have to do with me? So we have to explain as a clinician, case managers, community support workers, therapists, psychologists, teachers, in some form you're engaged in what is called a therapeutic relationship, but you're a so-called clinician. And we have different terms for that in our traditional languages, but in English they would use that terminology, clinician. So as a clinician, you need to explain properly what does cultural mean, what does spiritual mean, and why it's valuable, in our case, why it's necessary to engage that particular domain. So let's go further. We need to understand as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human service agents and educators, drafting or amending an individual treatment plan or individual recovery plan for our clients, a whole life philosophic approach must be at the core of consideration. It must be. This is a philosophic approach that addresses physical soundness, which is inclusive of natural foods, melanin, and substance abuse abstinence, and spiritual soundness, which is inclusive of emotional, mental, and psychological balance, centered in cultural awareness. Our journal, Nkwamua Whole Life Journal, deals with that. It deals with physical soundness and spiritual soundness rooted in cultural awareness. If we don't have those pieces, then it's not a whole life perspective. And as we can see, as we understand, our people are engaged in self-destructive behavior. Not just the people who are considered, whether it's children in foster care or juvenile so-called justice, bad schools or whatever. It's not just those children, it's other children. We're engaged in self-destructive behavior. It's not just adults who are considered to be mentally unwell or have behavioral health issues or mental health issues or Axis 1 diagnoses. There are people who have no diagnoses at all, but we're engaged in self-destructive behavior. If we don't understand culture, culture means way of life. We have an inherited culture, a culture that's wired into us spiritually, into our spiritual and physical DNA. It's like a lion has a culture, a way of life. So if you take a lion out of Afuraitkaitnit, Africa, and ship the lion over here and then let them go, they're going to operate the same way, the same culture as the lions and lionesses on the continent. If you have a lion over here that was taken from the continent, brought over here, placed in the zoo, and then they have children, have cubs, lion cubs. As those lion cubs are growing and you release them out into the wild, or so-called wild, but out into nature, eventually, very quickly, they will adapt and begin to function as the lions in Afuraitkaitnit, because they are wired with a certain way. They're designed to execute their life functions in a specific manner. We are the same way. Just because we were taken from the continent and brought over here and began to reproduce over here, we still have the same DNA, but we still have the same spiritual connection to every Afuraitkaitnit person on the planet. There's a connection that we have that is different from any other group of people. It's physiological, but it's also spiritual, and it manifests culturally. We have inclinations. We may have not studied anything about Afuraitkaitnit, anything about ancient African culture, contemporary African culture, don't know anything about a language, don't know anything about anything. But when we come in contact with certain situations and we act based on our own innate drives and motivations, we will end up functioning and operating like our brothers and sisters all around the world, on the continent and everywhere else, because we have a culture. So, and we're going to be able to prove that through the course of, the lecture, the presentation, but it's also something that we show our clients and allow them to discover for themselves and prove it to themselves without forcing it on them. So let's get back to that. So it's physical soundness, spiritual soundness, rooted in cultural awareness. That is a whole life perspective. If we don't use that philosophic approach, then we're not addressing the whole person. We're not addressing the whole aspect of the Afuraitkaitnit individual. So we're really not addressing their mental, behavioral health if we're not dealing with the whole life perspective. So we gave a basic definition that you often see on different treatment plans. The cultural spiritual says a sense of heritage and connection, fulfilling cultural responsibilities, expectations, participating in relevant activities, special issues around language and race, etc. So we also say, for thousands of years, Afuraitkaitnit Africans have recognized the reality that being grounded in the soundness of culture is key to our physical and spiritual wellness. This recognition is part of our intergenerational intellectual inheritance. This is something that has been transmitted through generations wherever we have gone, even through our experience here in what we call the Musuo Kesi, the great perversity, the enslavement era. We have still transmitted intergenerationally a knowledge of culture and the way for us to function and operate in a holistic and orderly fashion. Okay, so Commensurate with this recognition is the reality that there are many areas within the cultural spiritual domain that must be addressed in order for the Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit client to truly establish wellness within the whole of his or her life. So we give two examples. This is just an example of the value and the necessity of what can be called the cultural spiritual domain, but we understand if we don't address physical soundness, spiritual soundness from the center of culture, we are not engaged in assisting our people with achieving wellness. So one example is here. For hundreds of years since the beginning of the enslavement era in the Western Hemisphere until this day, our people have been programmed with the false notion of black inferiority via the media, schools, religious institutions, governmental institutions, etc. The acceptance of the insane notion of black inferiority engenders a false sense of self-hatred. This accepted self-hatred plays out in our daily interactions with one another and within ourselves. It is made manifest via a series of self-destructive behaviors, including but not limited to domestic violence, sexual abuse, gang violence, drug abuse, drug dealing. Let's stop right there. Domestic violence. If we are engaged in a self-hating mindset, if we've been taught that black is inferior, black hair is inferior, black features are inferior, black people are inferior, we've been taught that since the enslavement process. We've been taught the insane notion that God is a white man. If you believe that God is a white man, that insane notion, if you believe that, then you also believe that black people are inferior or somehow less than divine, don't have the same connection or don't have a connection to the divine like white people do. Now, of course, it's a foolish notion, but that's how we've been taught. So when you look at domestic violence, for example, if you have a deep sense, a deeply seated self-loathing or self-hatred, then when you look at your mate, and your mate is black and has black features, and when a male looking at a female, wishing that he had a white mate, but he can't have that, wishing he had somebody who was very light-skinned with very straight hair, almost close to white, but he doesn't have that. He's looking at his mate and is actually psychologically angry at her because he can't have what he wants or what he's been conditioned to want. So he's very aggressive towards her. He hates himself, and then when he sees her also, she's a reflection of him, and he hates himself. He feels like neither one of them are sacred. Neither one of them are valuable. If he saw her as valuable, he wouldn't attack her. He doesn't attack the white females that he works with, and if he had a white female, very often he wouldn't attack them. Now, some people do, but very often what happens is when they see somebody reflects themselves and they believe that they are inferior, then they take that foolishness out on the mate. The reverse is also true. A black female who's been conditioned to believe that God is a white man, which is foolish, but she believes that, she wishes she had light-skinned, straight-haired children, or she looks for a man who she can get with so that she can have children that look white. These are manifestations of mental illness, but it's conditioning that we've accepted. So when she sees her mate, she doesn't see a white male. She sees something that represents inferiority, just a lazy, ugly nigger. She wishes she had something else. These kinds of mindsets are moving and operating throughout our community. Is self-hatred. So domestic violence is a manifestation of that very often, because if you don't value yourself and somebody reminds you of yourself, you don't value them either. You wish that you had something else, and you're angry at them because they are not who you wish they would be. So you don't value them, you attack in some way, verbal attack, physical attack. There are all kinds of psychoses that manifest because of self-hatred. Domestic violence is one. Sexual abuse is another. We talked about gang violence, drug abuse. If you're abusing yourself with drugs, on some level, you have lost respect for yourself. Yes, drugs are addictive. They get in your system and connect with the melanin, the abatum, and they become very addictive. But the fact that you started engaging in that process, knowing, most people, everybody knows that certain drugs are destructive for the body. They don't think that they're healthy, but they engage the process anyway. Many people have deep within themselves a lack of self-respect. They don't mind attacking themselves, destroying themselves, because they don't have a respect for themselves, because they don't have love for themselves. If you respect yourself, then self-love is instantaneous. We don't have to teach our people to love themselves. If we teach them the truth about who they are, who we are, then they develop an automatic respect that's already wired into us, and the self-love is instantaneous. So, but if you don't have that, you don't respect yourself, you don't value yourself, you don't think you have a culture, because you don't think you have a purpose. If you don't think you have a purpose in the world, and you're just inferior and not close to anything divine or sacred, then you can be self-destructive, because you don't have any value anyway. It's like if you have a brand new car, you may take care of it. If you have an old beat up car that you don't really care about, you may not take care of it because it's on its way out anyway. We use that same mentality with ourselves because it's based on self-hatred. Okay, so we also mentioned these various forms of self-hatred play out in our daily lives. We talked about domestic abuse, sexual abuse, gang violence. Brothers don't respect each other. They see each other as enemies. As soon as they see, it's hatred. So drug abuse, we talk about drug dealing. Individuals ridiculing or being ridiculed because of their dark complexions. Ridiculing or being ridiculed because of their dark complexions, natural hair, African normal facial features. Our facial features are not abnormal. We are normal. We are the blueprint for what a human being is. We are the only human beings that were created. We were created millions of years ago as human beings, and then we migrated around the world and established civilizations all around the world. We established the sciences, we established medicine, we established art, we established architecture, engineering, everything. When a small group of our people migrated up into northern Eurasia and got caught up during the last ice age and eventually returned, who lost their pigmentation, these people are the ones who became the whites and their offspring, Europeans and Asians. By the time they migrated and came back in contact with the larger population of our people, we had already established the sciences and established civilization all around the world. The whites and their offspring, Europeans and Asians, that includes white Europeans, Asians, Hindus, Arabs, and so forth, they all learned about civilization, civilized society, the arts, the sciences, religion, spirituality. They learned about these things from coming in contact with us. They didn't have any of these things until they came in contact with us. And it was based on their observation and eventually them invading our countries, waging war for thousands of years. Most of that time they were being crushed militarily by our armies, but over the last, especially over the last 150 plus years, they have gained the upper hand. But before all of that happened, over the past 150 years, for thousands of years, we were running not just Afuraitkaitnit, the continent, but we were in Southern Europe, Southern Asia, North, Central, and South America, and the Caribbean, thousands of years before Europeans even existed, and then of course before they migrated here. So when we when you see people ridiculing others because of dark complexions, or being ridiculed because they have a dark complexion, ridiculing others because they have normal African features. Our noses are not wide, they're normal. Europeans have unusually small noses. Our lips are not big or full, we have normal. We are the prototype for humanity. We're the only people who created. Their lips are unusually small. Our body types are the standard for what a human being is. We were created. Theirs is not. So we're the standard to be measured against. We don't measure ourselves against them. They're not the standard. We're the standard. So anything that deviates from the standard, that's abnormal. But the Europeans have flipped that around since the enslavement process to make themselves artificially the standard, and anything that doesn't measure up to their standard to them, then they say it's abnormal. So we've taken on that foolish mindset So we ridicule people with darker complexions, meaning a natural complexion, or African normal facial features, natural hair, meaning normal hair, all those different things. Darker skinned children and adults being treated negatively by teachers, parents, and others, while witnessing lighter skinned children and adults being praised, treated with favoritism, etc. Not only have we seen that, and that goes on all across the country and different parts of the world, but our clients, our consumers, if you're working with a client, if you're a therapist, if you're a psychologist, if you're a case manager, if you're a community support worker, if you're a teacher, you're a social worker in a hospital, no matter where you are, our clients are dealing with these things, and it generates anxiety. If they're being ridiculed because of, they have a darker skin, normal skin, or natural features, natural hair, and so forth, or they engage in ridiculing others, that's a manifestation of self-hatred. So these are just examples, but there are many more, of course, and we've understood that. So all these things combined are just manifestations of self-hatred. However, when Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit are given an accurate assessment of our biological and cultural identity, when we talk about what melanin is, the pigment, the chemical that gives us our color, and what it actually does for us, and then we talk about our cultural identity, our true story, not his story, but our true story, or true historical information, then that information, that self-hatred is knocked down. Our accomplishments over thousands of years around the world in the establishment and maintenance of civilization, our positive inherited cultural values, and thus the brilliance of our ancestral legacy, such knowledge becomes an anchored source of empowerment and resilience. The reincorporation of our positive inherited ancestral values leads to transformative changes in outlook and behavior. We're going to go into that when we start going into how to conduct interventions with clients using the journal and using the Afura model. And this is just giving an example. All these manifestations of self-hatred, domestic violence, sexual abuse, gang violence, drug use, destroying your body because you really don't care about your body, the ridicule of people with natural features, or people experiencing that or engaging in it, all those manifestations of self-hatred can be neutralized, and we have done this for years with proper information about our biological and cultural identity. You can knock that out rather quickly. All that programming that we've had all of our lives can be knocked out with accurate information. So that's one example of how culture is important. Another example, our clients live in areas and conditions that they can directly associate with racism. And here are some examples, and of course this is not an exhaustive list. The unjust harassment by police, including intimidation, driving while black. In our neighborhoods, our clients, our consumers, our children, and so forth, we understand that people are unjustly harassed by police on a regular basis. That has been going on since we have been, of course, in this country for hundreds of years. They understand that. They understand this racism, even though some people try to say, oh, you're just, making it up. They know innately, instinctively, that they're being treated in a negative fashion because they're black. They know it's racism, and they internalize that, and it can cause anxiety because they know what's happening, and sometimes they don't understand what they need to do to neutralize it or fight it. The prison industrial complex, which many clients and or their children or relatives are in, even if innocent. We understand the prison industrial complex. We understand that, for example, some statistics will say upwards of 70% of all arrests are white people in this country. The other 30% or so are divided up between black, Hispanic, Asian, other. But although 70% of the arrests are of whites, over 50% of the population in the jails are black. Now, why is that? White people are getting off. They're getting light sentences or no sentences. But we're not being arrested as much at the same rate, but we're our numbers are astronomical with respect to the jail populations, male and female. Our people, our clients, our consumers, our teachers, the people who we work with, they know that. They know that instinctively. They see it. They see evidence of it. It's in their families. It has happened to them. They've been harassed by police. Some people have been locked up unjustifiably. Some people have been locked up for possession of small amounts of drugs and been locked up for years. And they see their white counterparts being arrested for larger amounts and never spent more than a day behind bars. They understand that this is racism and it's impacting them on a daily basis and their families. The daily disrespect experienced by our clients in stores within their communities that are run by non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit, non-Africans, non-blacks. So we have, for example, Koreans, we have Arabs, we have other people in our communities with dirty stores, smelly stores, rotten food, expired food, high prices. They talk negatively. They lust at the women. They curse at people. They're very disrespectful. They put bulletproof glass and criminalize, the whole community. They treat people with the utmost disrespect. Our people understand that this is what they're doing because they have such a disdain for us. They want to take our money and leave our community with our money and go back to their communities, but they have nothing but disdain for us. Our people understand that. They can directly associate that with racism because they know exactly what it is, although people try to seduce them into the false belief that we're making it up in our minds. We understand racism when we see it. And sometimes they just, the perpetrators just come right out and say it. High poverty rates and lack of employment opportunities while witnessing illegal immigrants being employed. We know that we can be highly qualified for a position, whether it's professional or not professional, and as soon as we get to the interview, they see who we are and they reject us outright. And then you have, Europeans or Asians or some other groups go in and get the same position, or they allow them to, get paid more. They treat them differently on the job and so forth. We understand all that has to do with racism. The lack of services from the government in our communities, or poorly managed services, going to the housing authority, people going to the Social Security Administration, people going to different departments within the municipal government or the federal government or the state government, and the way we're treated by the customer service agents, especially if you have people who are in low-income areas, people who have mental health diagnoses, people who have different issues, people who are in foster care, people who are, part of some agency or connected to some service, and they can pinpoint who these people are. They feel like they don't have to respect them, and our people have to deal with them on a regular basis, and they understand what that has to do with. They understand it's a racist attitude. Poorly managed mass transit services in our communities, trash collection issues, emergency utility issue response delays, emergency snow removal delays, being treated unfairly or ridiculed when applying for assistance at government agencies, poorly managed hospitals in our communities, poorly run schools with teachers and administrators who have no positive regard for black children, who would rather expel our children or try to drug our children, of course, instead of embracing our children and trying to direct them on the proper path. Our people understand what's going on with that. They understand that's racism at the root of it. The inordinate number of liquor stores, liquor advertisements, cigarette advertisements, etc. in the community. We have billboards. As soon as you're in a white community, you cross the border into a black community, all of a sudden you see all these liquor advertisements. It's not because we just enjoy liquor more. It's a direct, deliberate propaganda move to basically, if you look at substance abuse, and we have a section on substance abuse, abstinence in the journal, the enslavement process of our people initially didn't begin with the Europeans. It began with the Arabs over close to 1,000 years before the Europeans was strong enough or in the position to engage in that practice. There's such slave trade called the Indian Ocean slave trade and the Arab slave trade. So for hundreds of years, centuries, we have been at war with Arabs, Hindus, Persians, and so forth. Those, when they captured our prisoners of war, captured our warriors and so forth, they would sell the warriors off in an Arab slave trade or an Indian Ocean slave trade. Many people don't know that some would say about 15%, I've seen that number, 15% of the population of Iraq is black people, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit black people. We were the original inhabitants of that area before Europeans came into existence. At that time, over 6,000 years ago, and into 5,000, 4,000, the area was called Sumer. People were called Sumerians. These were black people who established civilization in that area. Next door in Iran, that place back then was called Elam, and this was another black civilization, an ancient civilization, high civilization, high culture. And Europeans eventually invaded and waged war for thousands of years. Were at war with our people. But by the time the Arabs come, this is over 1,000 years ago, wars continued. Some of them were able to take over the northern portion of what is now called Iraq. After a series of wars, they were able to take control. So about 15% of the population, somewhere around that number, is still Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit black people who have been there for thousands of years, as well as those who were brought there during the Arab slave trade. So, and they live mostly in the south. So, and you'll notice that in the Basra region, so you'll notice that when the United States went to bomb Iraq, when they began the war in Iraq, they went straight to the Basra region and started bombing. They went to the region where the large black populations were and started bombing. It's no different than if China decided to invade America and started sending bombers over here, and the only places they bombed were black inner city areas. That's not really a war against America. That would be a war against blacks in America. And it was the same thing in Iraq. They went straight to those regions. Same thing in Libya and different places. But, so the Arabs were involved in the slave trade prior to the Europeans. When the Europeans were strong enough to get involved, then they got involved. The same thing in India. There was enslavement of our people in India. There are hundreds of millions of black people in India. We were the original founders of that civilization before Europeans invaded that area. In the Tang dynasty in China, around what they would call the 8th century AD, the Chinese were enslaving African people, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, prisoners of war, when they were able to capture some through the whole Arab slave trade, Indian Ocean slave trade process. They enslaved some of our people when they were able. Now, most of the time they were not able, just like most of the time the Europeans and Arabs, there were only certain pockets of people that they were able to capture because we were waging war and we were usually winning. It's only been in the past 150 plus years that Europeans have really gained the upper hand. But for hundreds of years, whenever the Europeans, the Arabs, the Hindus, the Asians, including the Chinese, whenever they got a chance, they were enslaving our people. Now, when we were brought over here during the Atlantic slave trade, so-called slave trade, we were enslaved. We weren't slaves on the continent and brought over here. We were free people who were enslaved when we got here. So they didn't bring slaves from Afuraitkaitnit. They brought architects, they brought agriculturalists, they brought doctors, physicians, people who were involved in, engineering, all these different kinds of fields of endeavor. And then once we got here, we were imprisoned and we were enslaved. So one of the first crops, the major crops that we were forced to pick was not cotton. Before cotton became quote unquote king as the major crop, it was tobacco as well as hemp. So we were forced for centuries, in some cases, to be placed on plantations to pick tobacco. Now the children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren of the tobacco farms, plantations, are the owners of the big tobacco companies. So the same people who were enslaving our ancestresses and ancestors on plantations, working us to death for their own profit, their grandchildren are still enslaving our people. Because if you smoke cigarettes, and smoking-related cancers is the #1 killer for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in America. If you add up all the other killers, whether it's fires or car crashes or all these different things combined, they don't equal the number of smoking-related cancers in our community. So that's the #1 killer. The same people who enslaved us, making us pick tobacco, their grandchildren own those same tobacco plantations, and they are enslaving us and killing us today. Because if you go into a gas station or if you go into a convenience store and you pick tobacco from the shelf, then you're picking the same tobacco from the same plantation and you're putting it in your body. And what's happening is, once it gets in your system, it's working your heart and your lungs to death. So you're paying the plantation owner, the tobacco plantation owner, to work, to enrich them, while you're being worked to death at the same time, and you succumb to an untimely death. Just like our ancestresses and ancestors were forced to work on the plantations till they died very early in their lives to enrich the plantation owners. Now what happened was, previously the Arabs were in control of the enslavement process, but when the Europeans got stronger than the Arabs, they united. What happened was the Arabs would capture very often, and then they would deliver us up to the Europeans for a fee. They were the middleman at that point. The same thing is occurring today, and it was the same with the Asians and the Hindus. The same thing is occurring today. The white plantation owners took over, so they were running the plantations in the Americas. The Arabs, just like they caught our people and delivered us up to the Europeans, typically their descendants, the descendants of the white plantation owners, are the cigarette company owners. The descendants of the white Arabs and Hindus and so forth and Asians are the white Arabs and the Asians and the Hindus who are working in these convenience stores that are in the black communities all across the country. And they are the ones usually selling us the cigarettes and the alcohol and so forth, and sometimes the crack cocaine and the heroin and other drugs. So they are the middleman again. The Europeans own the tobacco plantations and the products, and the Arabs, Hindus, and Asians deliver us up as the middleman to the Europeans. We give them our money, we enrich them, and we die at the same time. So this is a process that's not just been going on for the past few decades, where convenience stores like 7-Eleven and other corner stores are selling this poison to us. And we weren't just enslaved on plantations, also in alcohol distilleries. Some people were enslaved to do that kind of work. So when they sell us alcohol, sell us tobacco, sell us marijuana, because we were picking hemp as well, the same groups, Europeans, Asians, Hindus, and so forth, are enslaving our people at the same time. So that's just, and we understand that when we go into a store and it's dirty and it's smelly, they're selling rotten meat, they disrespect the people, we understand that this has to do with their disdain for us. It's purely racism. We understand that, and our people are dealing with these issues on a regular basis. Okay, so we touched on that. We talked about the expired food items on the shelves, overpricing in our communities in comparison to other communities, the inordinate number of liquor stores, liquor advertisements, cigarette advertisements, and so forth in the community, having to patronize retail establishments where consumers must purchase everyday items through bulletproof glass, criminalization of the entire community. So we talked about that. We talked about different stores, for example, major grocery store chains and convenience store chains being regularly out of water when it's hot outside. Those kind of little things, rotten fruits and vegetables, and we said expired food items on the shelves. We all understand that if they had these stores in other communities, not only would the other communities not support them, but they wouldn't even attempt to put overpriced items or expired food items or being out of water and things like that in other communities. They treat our community like that because it has to do with racism, and we understand that. struggling to pay market rent for apartments that are owned by slumlords, rodent and insect infestation issues, heating issues, loitering issues, living in high crime areas where the police look the other way with regard to drug dealing, possession, and so forth, assault. We're living under all these various conditions. Our clients, our consumers, our children, our students, they are living under these conditions. They can be directly associated with racism. It can become overwhelming for anybody in the community who doesn't know how to handle these kinds of things. But it definitely, if somebody has a behavioral health issue, a mental health issue, or going through some kind of, or connected to some kind of agency and they need assistance, definitely they're going to have problems dealing with these issues. If we don't address things from a cultural perspective, to put these things in context and show them, empower them in a way to overcome these obstacles and maintain their sanity in the real sense, in the true sense, then we're not really serving them. We're not serving them in a whole life approach or perspective. So this is why we say they live under these conditions. If they're internalized, they contribute to chronic anxiety. All these different things that we're living under on a day-to-day basis, not only the part about self-hatred and the ridicule and domestic violence and things like that inside the home, inside the schools, but then when they leave and go outside, as soon as they step outside their door, they get on the bus, go to the store, go to a government agency, go to a school, go to a job, or traveling to these different areas, we are bombarded with racism on a regular basis. For some of our people, that can lead to chronic anxiety. It leads to depression, can lead to anger, it can lead to physical disease such as hypertension, self-medicating, like we talked about, alcohol and drug use, overeating, which in turn leads to obesity and disease, diabetes, kidney disease, heart and lung disease, liver disease, and so forth. The lack of coping skills and the internalization of self-hatred related to racism contribute to some clients exploding via domestic violence incidents, acting out other forms of violence, or imploding under suicidal ideation, self-denigrating or self-harming behaviors. The confluence of these factors gives rise to huge, high incidence of physical illness, death, incarceration, and/or mental illness in our community, inclusive of youth and adults, uneducated and educated or professional. So it's not just people who are uneducated, it's not just youth, it's not just people who are not professionals, professionals and non-professionals, educated, quote unquote, uneducated, young and old. These things affect us. When we internalize these things, it affects our emotions, which leads to the way we communicate with one another, but it also manifests as physical illness, anxiety, sometimes mental illness in various forms. However, the negative emotional and mental psychological effects and the destructive behaviors manifested by our clients can be reversed through engaging the clients through the cultural spiritual domain. This is effected by providing our clients with accurate information about our identity as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, and our positive inherited cultural values rooted in our identity and our unique approach to the resolution of conflict and eradication of disordered thoughts and behavior rooted in our inherited cultural values. So then we give an example of a cultural spiritual domain goal and a set of objectives. So you understand when you have a treatment plan, you have to have goals and objectives. In the cultural spiritual domain, and we'll go through the process of how to conduct these interventions. When you're sitting with clients, you have to arrive at some goals. You have to establish some workable objectives that can be achieved. And then, of course, if you're working for an agency, your funding sources have to see documentation, progress notes, and so forth that actually capture interventions that are effective, that match up with the objectives, meet the objectives, and help the consumer or the client meet the goals. So we go into that as well. We have an example of an intervention in the cultural spiritual domain here that we've used successfully with young children as well as adults for over a decade in educating the individual on melanin. and we provide the client with a 7-part definition of melanin, and that definition is in the Nkwamuwa journal. Let's see, does anybody have any questions so far on the Nchin document that we're going over? And you can, like when we posted it, so you can read it along with it. This is the document for the people who joined after we started. But we're just going through this Nchin document. Anybody have any questions on that so far? Okay, so we're just going point by point of this document, because this document, the Nchin principled adaptability, individual treatment plans, and the cultural spiritual domain, this establishes the foundation for utilizing the domain, the value of utilizing culture in order to approach our clients, our consumers, our children with a whole life perspective, and showing that if we don't approach our clients with that perspective, we are not serving our clients. We have to serve the whole of the person, or we're just wasting time. We're just continuing the conditioning process. We're just giving them, some of us are just giving them a painkiller and allowing them to, continue, but the disease is getting worse. The causes are not being addressed. We're just dealing with symptoms, and we're just masking the pain. We need to deal with our people in a whole life perspective, and when we deal with physical soundness and spiritual soundness from the center of culture, then we can clear up some of these illnesses that are considered mental illnesses. Sometimes they just have to be dealt with in a holistic way with regard to diet, not some of the medications that we often just write prescriptions out and give to people. Some of these psychotropics and these atypicals, sometimes our people don't need these. Sometimes people can just deal with diet from a holistic perspective. They have deficiencies, and then they have to deal with coping skills and a way to view the world, and we have to introduce our people to their innately held root, positive, inherited ancestral values, and we can transform. Okay, so let's go through this example of an intervention in the cultural spiritual domain. So we talked about melanin, and this is something that we have shared with children as well as adults. So it says melanin is a chemical in our body that gives us our color. Melanin is found in our skin, of course. It gives us our brown skin, black skin, hair, eyes, and all the major internal organs and systems. Without melanin, the organs would not function properly. Melanin is also found in animals, plants, minerals, the ocean, earth, clouds, stars, the sun, and is a black substance of space, making up over 99% of the universe, which physicists refer to as dark matter and dark energy. So melanin is in our skin, it's in all our major organs and body systems. Without melanin, which we call abatum, your organs would not function properly. It's in 12 centers of your brain, that's neuromelanin. It's key to everything, all the proper functioning physiologically of our bodies. Melanin is also in all animal life, that's why animals have color. It's in plant life, that's why plants have color. It's in mineral life, that's why the earth and other planets have color. It's in the clouds, it's in the sun, it's in stars. It's in the black substance that is called dark matter or dark energy that all the planets, sun, moon, and stars dwell in. That black plasma, that is actually what they will call cosmic melanin, and that same substance is within our bodies as the melanin that's in our skin and gives us our pigment. Okay, it's found at the site of infections, cuts, and wounds. It helps to clot blood and so forth. So when you get a cut, melanin goes to the cut. It helps to clot the blood. It helps to cleanse out the wound, and then it creates a natural band-aid, which we call a scab, which of course is dark because it has melanin, and it helps to protect from further infection and also helps to heal the wound. And eventually, days later, when the scab falls off, then the wound is healed. So melanin is actually healing and protecting us. Beyond just being the color, it's healing and protecting us. We also talk about the melanin molecule readily binds with drugs such as cocaine, marijuana, nicotine, etc. Black people, because of our high melanin content, therefore get hooked quicker and stay hooked longer on drugs than any other race. Drug use is thus more devastating to us than others. So we have more melanin, more pigment inside our bodies as well as outside than any other group. When drugs like cocaine or heroin or marijuana get into our system, the molecular structure is very similar, so a hybrid is created molecularly, and then our bodies begin to crave this hybrid, so therefore we get hooked quicker and we stay hooked longer than any other group when we engage in drug use. Europeans understand that. They manufactured crack based on our molecular structure with regard to melanin, so that we would get hooked quicker and stay hooked longer, and it would be more devastating to us than it is to other groups. But even beyond crack, any drug, whether it's marijuana, whether it's heroin, cocaine, PCP, ecstasy, anything, all of these synthetic drugs bind to melanin, so melanin-dominant people get hooked quicker and stay hooked longer than any other group. But however, so that just shows how destructive drug use is to our people. But all these other facts about melanin being the sun, moon, stars, the black substance of space, animals, plant life, mineral life, helps us to heal our bodies, helps to protect us, and so forth. These things that most of our people don't know. So when they hear about how melanin, the chemical that makes us black, is a chemical found in every aspect of nature, all around us in the earth, stars, sun, plant life, and so forth, is key to the proper functioning of our organs, and even helps to heal us, they develop a great respect rooted in biology for being black, which they never had before. Clients, they can no longer inferiorize themselves or other black people by accepting the insanity of black inferiority. When we've given a 10-minute presentation on the different things that melanin does within the body and how it's all around us in all aspects of nature, the only place it's not is in the melanin recessive, the European. But every aspect of nature that they can see, plant life, animal life, mineral life within us, planets, sun, stars, black substance of space, and then what it does internally, biologically, they can no longer, whether it's children or adults, they can no longer inferiorize themselves and speak negatively about being black anymore. Even if they used to call somebody, oh, you so black, and black ugly thing and stuff like that, once they get that 10-minute lesson, all of that is squashed. They can't do it anymore because now they associate black with something that's positive, something that's empowering, something that's healing, something that protects us. The actual things that melanin does, that's an intervention, just giving that lesson. We've given that lesson to people, whether they were in after-school programs because of juvenile detention and juvenile justice issues, people who are so-called mentally ill, people who have been homeless, people in various different settings. And that 10-minute intervention, they could come back weeks later and not see you for weeks or months and still tell you about melanin the next time they see you because it affected them so deeply. Okay. And they begin to immediately seriously reassess the idea of contaminating this wonderful chemical with toxic drugs and behavior. Now they can associate not only the wonderful things that melanin does for us, but then when they see people, engage in self-destructive behavior through drug use, they can't see it as, oh, well, that's just natural. Weed is natural, it's from the earth, and so forth. Or, this is just something that we can do. It's nobody's doing this against us. Drug sales and so forth, that has nothing to do with black people. They understand that this is a war being waged against our community. When they understand who they are biologically and how destructive drug use is to melanin-dominant people, then they understand the political aspect of it as well as the health aspect of it, and they have to reassess their approach to drug use or reassess their whole mindset towards what the value of drug use is, just from that one lesson. There are innumerable lessons from Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit culture that can transform notions of identity and naturally increase self-esteem, like we talked about before, leading to positive changes in behavior and motivation. These lessons span such issues as resilience, decision-making, conflict resolution, critical examination, the value of education and study, the value of cultural precedent, encoded values, and a number of different subjects that we can touch on, which we're going to get into when we look at the journal. Okay, so, and these lessons can be shared in individual settings, in group settings, on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. Critical to disseminating such lessons as an Afuraitkaitnit human service agent or professional or educator is facilitating the client's self-discovery of how these lessons are part of an inherited set of positive cultural values. These things that are wired within us. That's key for us as Afuraitkaitnit people in America who falsely believe that we have been cut off from our culture. Okay, so we talk about that a little bit more, and then we talk about finally utilization of the cultural spiritual domain by Afuraitkaitnit human service agents and educators in the service of our Afuraitkaitnit clients, expedites their recovery, restoration by increasing our clients' motivation and awakening their innate propensity toward personal and group empowerment. They learn to adapt and are thus empowered to navigate the twists and turns of life with skill and dexterity. This is an expression of the Afuraitkaitnit approach to wellness, a whole life approach reflecting principled adaptability. So again, this is the foundation, the rationale for the necessity of utilizing culture in the process of our people achieving wellness, principled adaptability. So do we have any questions so far on this? Sister says, will this intervention work on psychosis? It has worked, and we're going to go into the intervention process. We have worked with people who have various forms of psychoses. Sometimes the psychoses have a physiological component as well as a behavioral health component. Sometimes they don't have a physiological component. I have a previous client. His diagnosis was bipolar 2 disorder. He was the kind of individual who would try to jump off of balconies, walk into traffic, set himself on fire, all these kinds of things. He did have a physiological issue. There was some brain damage. He had been shot in the head before. However, there were 2 things that happened. He ended up leaving the state, and he got connected, because I gave the information to his godmother, he got connected with a naturopath, and she showed him different dietary practices, took him off the medication. This was months ago, and I just heard from the godmother recently. She said he's been doing fine. So she took him off the medication, put him on a natural diet, and then he also got the information through his godmother from the journal that I gave to reorient him towards self or constructive behavior. Because even though he had a physiological issue, most of his quote unquote psychoses, when he would go to mental health hospitals, be hospitalized for weeks at a time, sometimes months, be incarcerated for months at a time. He was a very intelligent brother. You could tell there were certain things that were off. Part of it was from the brain injury, but a lot of it had to do with internalized self-destructive worldview. And once he was given a different worldview in connection with a different diet and so forth, he was able to transform. Okay. Will these interventions work more specifically on a particular cluster of DSM disorders? No, it depends. It really, if there's a physiological component, and now some people have, if they've been shot and it's a really very damaging to nerves and so forth, and their synapses are not firing properly, and they're just kind of catatonic and they can't do anything. There are certain things that are physiological that have to be dealt with that way, and it's only so much you can do. But most of these disorders, most of these major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder, and even some of the schizophrenia, disorders under that rubric. A lot of them have to do with you know, their worldview. Some of these issues, and we talked about this in a different session, and we don't get into this with the clients, but since you're asking, some of them is a spiritual problem. When they talk about their hearing voices, they want to harm themselves, they want to harm other people. Some of that has to do with spiritual communication. Sometimes that has to do with ancestral communication. And you can tell if you're skilled and you're connected to ancestral culture, you can tell the people who are really going through that, and it has nothing to do with therapy, it has nothing to do with, you know, medicine or atypicals and things like that. If the clinician is skilled and they can deal with those spirits that are, you know, plaguing the person ritually and get rid of them, it's done. It has nothing to do with therapy. They don't have to sit in therapy for months or years. They don't have to sit in groups. If you remove the spirits that are dealing with them and causing problems for them, and then help them, you know, to empower themselves, they'll be straight. But that doesn't have anything to do with the, you know, that's a different session. That's a different, like when we're teaching the sessions to human service professionals and, you know, case managers and therapists and so forth, we give them information about why culture is necessary for a whole life approach to their clients. Then we show how to conduct these interventions using the journal, and people have success. They help people moderate their behavior, change their worldview. People, when they change their worldview, they're very much more open to change their dietary practices. They're much more open to reject and stop using things like marijuana, cocaine, and so forth. They begin a process of purging themselves of that. A lot of these psychoses, in reality, have to do with this drug use. So, and when the drug use is chronic, then they open themselves up to other entities and so forth. But when we deal with that, that's a different subject. In the Sankofadwuma, we typically just deal with teaching the information in the journal, getting people focused culturally, and showing what their positive inherited cultural values are and how they can use those as a skill set that transfers to other areas of life so they can live a more balanced and harmonious life. Okay, any other questions on that before we move forward? Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the Afura document. Okay, you can, and I'll put the link if you scroll down, you'll see the link. This is the Afura document, Whole Life Interventions. And while these interventions we have used for a number of years with people with a whole range of, you know, Axis 1 DSM diagnoses as well, but it's not just for people with so-called mental health issues, it's also for our people in general, because again, when we are faced with all these different issues and we internalize them, it leads to chronic anxiety, anger, depression, self-medication, overeating. Again, we talked about, you know, which develops into other forms of disease and so forth. So if we change our outlook based on our culture, we can affect our physical soundness, our spiritual soundness, rooted in culture. So, okay, no other questions on that. All right, the Afura Whole Life Interventions. The Nchin was basically the rationale, the foundation for why culture is necessary to assist our clients to achieve wellness in a holistic fashion. Now we have a model to conduct interventions, and we call it the Afura model. It is an acronym, and we'll go through the acronym. And then once we go through this process of, you know, how we conduct these interventions, we'll look inside the journal, because what we do is, what I do is I give a copy of the journal to my consumers, to my clients. And sometimes if it's a client that can't read, you can sit down and read the information to them. You can do it, you can help them with other issues. If you're a case manager, community support worker, therapist, if you're working on various issues, if they have housing issues, if they have legal issues, you deal with those different issues. In addition to that, before you leave the client, you can give them just for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, often if you're billing for service, if you're an independent contractor, Very often those billing units are in 15-minute chunks, so you can use 1 unit, but usually it goes into at least 2 units, because as soon as you give them the information in a non-confrontational way, you just share information with them, they are very open to it and they want to hear more, and they start to look forward. Even those clients who are quote-unquote difficult, who don't want to see their therapist, or are being forced to see a therapist, or don't want to see their community support worker, or don't want to see their psychologist, once you start giving them this kind of information, just sharing it with them, then some of them start looking forward to seeing their therapist, or seeing their caseworker. So, so we give them the information. I usually give them, either I give them a physical copy of the journal, or I sit down and read to them, or I can give it to a parent if it's a child, or I can give it to some other family member. If the person can't read, you read it with them, or read it with you share the information with them, and that's even a skill building exercise. If they can't read, then you can read it to them and show them different vocabulary that they're not accustomed to hearing or using. So that's development as well. So we're going to go through the process first. Okay. So no questions on that. All right. Afura is an acronym for our whole life approach to interventions. This is for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Black people, African Americans, so forth. Our consumers, our clients, our consumers, students, parents, individuals, etc. It's a process used to assist our clients in the incorporation of positive, inherited cultural values. That's key. Those that are inherited. We're not seeking to force something into somebody or give them some foreign doctrine. What we're doing is reinforcing their positive, inherited cultural values. Those values that are innately held within them, that we have been wired with for millions of years, and that we have transferred intergenerationally from one family set to the next across continents. That's key. It is a 5-step process which replicates the cyclical unfolding of life as expressed through what we call the curricula, or our Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit cosmogram shown below. And this is the curricula. Curricula simply means the house of life in ancient Kemet. Okay, so now we'll get into some of that later. The language aspect. The colored circles within the cosmogram reference the cardinal positions of the sun in its apparent cyclical movement. They also reference the seeding, rooting, sprouting, flowering, and harvesting cycle of plant life replicated in the 5 steps of Afura: analysis, facilitation, underscoring, realization, and adaptability. Assisting our Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit African and Black clients to incorporate positive inherited cultural values through employing the Afura process prompts the unfolding of their awareness. Our clients are thereby empowered with a whole life approach to address the circumstances of life. So, if you look at the cosmogram, and you can download this, I have the link there, you'll see on this side the white circle, the black circle, the yellow, and the red. So when you look at the yellow circle, for example, that's at the 3 o'clock position. So that's like the sun rising above the horizon. So you have the horizon line here in the center, the sun rising, then the sun at its highest point in the sky at noon, then the sun setting here, and then the sun going underground, and then eventually rising again in the east. So that's the cyclical movement of the sun. We are connected to that same cyclical movement. We rise around the same time the sun when we're on a natural cycle. We're at our peak of development and action, our most vigorous expression of behavior during the hottest time of the day. Then as the sun sets, we begin to cool down, we become more contemplative and reflective, and then when the sun goes under, quote unquote, underground, then we go to sleep to regenerate and retool so that we can rise up again the next morning with the sun. And that whole cycle is the process that we use here. Now, when you look at it also is connected to spring. That's like March 20th, March 21st. At the red circle at the top, the hottest time of the year, around June 21st, the summer solstice. Then when the sun begins to lose some of its energy, and we get down to the fall at the evening point, or the equinox, the fall equinox, around September 22nd, 23rd, and there are about 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness, and then the black circle at the bottom is when the sun is at its lowest point as far as daylight. So there are about 9 hours of daylight, but only about 15 hours of darkness, and then it moves up again to the spring session. So that whole process deals with the movement of the sun, the seasons, our movement. But if you look here around the section of fall, when the sun is setting, that's similar to the sun. The sun becomes, old, gray, and that's why the symbol is white. And these are sacred colors that represent different aspects. When the sun begins to go underground, that's akin to a seed being planted in the ground. And when the seed is planted in the ground, the first thing that happens is the roots go down into where the black circle is, in the blackness, where the nourishment is, where the nutrients are in the black soil, where the moisture is in the black soil, and they get nourished and strengthened. And then the next step is when they sprout above the surface, and that's that yellow circle where the sun is rising, there's awareness, there's illumination, and so forth. The sprouts have come up. Then it goes to the peak point where the full flowering of the plant occurs, and then again when you get down to that white circle, that's when the leaves and the fruits are falling off the plant. It's time to harvest what you have grown. But it's also a time of reseeding. So when you put the seeds back in the earth, then the roots go back down, and then the whole process starts again. So there's a color code, and this is an ancient cosmogram that has been used by our people not only on the continent of Afuraitkaitnit for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, but you'll find that we brought this same symbol into America. So they've discovered amongst our people during the enslavement process and after, those who retain certain aspects of their culture, they find this symbol drawn in different forms, and we still use this symbol. Some of us don't use the symbol, but we still try to live in harmony with the cycle. We try to rise with the sun. We try to, eat certain foods at certain times of the day, and after a certain time of day, we try not to eat food. So when we go to sleep, we try not to go to sleep angry or upset or with a lot of anxiety, because we know that we need to be cool and at rest so we can regenerate and have clear dreams and clear goals that are being addressed during our dreams. So when we rise up, we have some information that we can operate on. We still have these different notions of what these cycles are, even though we've been cut off from the continent for thousands of years. So we use this cyclical, this cosmogram and the cycle to represent not just those phases of life, but how we do our interventions. So the first piece is at the 9 o'clock region, when the sun is setting. The sun enters the earth. The energy of the sun penetrates the earth. That's similar to a seed being planted. So the first piece, it says seeding, and it also says analysis. Analysis of ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African ancestral values. So for example, this symbol that we talked about in the beginning, when you do an intervention with a consumer, you can show them the journal, you give them some information, say for example about melanin. You give them some basic things about melanin. That's the seeding process. It's an analysis of ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral values. Or you give them some traditional proverbial wisdom. Then the next piece says rooting, facilitation of the client's self-discovery of innately held root values. The next piece says sprouting, underscore the identity of the client's innately held root values with ancient ancestral values. The next piece says flowering, realization of root ancient values as a direct genetic inheritance, inborn and indestructible. And the last piece says harvesting or adaptability of root ancient values to address present life circumstances inclusive of racism. So I'm going to give you an example of how we've conducted these sessions with clients who have no knowledge whatsoever of anything African, were never interested in anything African, don't care nothing about any of that stuff, but we conduct these interventions. We don't bring this out. This is for yourself, for your own, this is a guide for you as you're going through the intervention. But we're going to use the journal to show you how we conduct these interventions. Now, this is a journal, Nkwamua Whole Life Journal. And we put a link to excerpts from the journal on the chat right here. The very first entry on the chat, well, actually the third one, it says Nkwamua front, excerpts, and back. So first we'll show, there are a number of different things in the journal. For example, right in the midst of the journal, and this is part of the excerpt, so you can click on that link right now and you can pull up that page. It's page 13. And we show a picture of one of the pyramids, one of the step pyramids in ancient Kemet. And then we also show the picture of the Per-A right here, or the pharaoh Djeser, who ordered that the pyramid be built, and then the brother Imhotep, who was the architect, also the physician, the chief physician, but he was the architect of that particular pyramid. It's over 5,000 years old, this particular pyramid. Now, what's interesting about that particular pyramid is if you flip the page to page 14, on the inside, and you can't see it too good on the camera, but when you download it, you'll see that the symbols from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are inscribed inside the pyramid. Now, this was 5,000 years ago, and the pyramid was built by this particular black pharaoh, this black Per-A, Djeseru or Djeser, and the architect was Imhotep. Two black males, 5,000 years ago in ancient Kemet, which is called ancient Egypt. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. What that shows people instantly when they see it is that 5,000 years ago, before there was such group of people called Arabs, before there was such group called Hindus, we already had the numeral system. So the numbers that we write every day, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, those forms were created by our ancestors and ancestors over 5,000 years ago. So every time from that point that one of our consumers, after just showing them that picture and reading the information on those pages, they know that every time they write down a number, this is something that comes from our great-great-great-grandparents on the continent. In school books, they call them the Hindi Arabic numerals, or sometimes they just call them Arabic numerals. And they continue to lie to say that the Arabs or the Hindus, or a combination of them, created the numeral system. They also say they created mathematics and algebra and geometry and trigonometry and so forth, and they associate that with the Greeks and the Arabs, and none of that is accurate. They also associate the alphabet with Europeans, but we established the alphabet in ancient Kemet and Nubia, Kanit, before Europeans, Arabs, Hindus, Asians existed on Earth. Before they came into being, we had already created these things. So when they see that particular picture, they're automatically, just within a few minutes, they're surprised and they're kind of awestruck, because we've been taught that we're inferior, and Asians master math, and Arabs and Hindus and Europeans, they've mastered math, and so forth. But in reality, we created the numeral system, and we were the first people to practice the mathematical sciences, the exact sciences. So that's one quick intervention that gets them, on board. Now, when you show them something like that, and we also show them this, for example. This is also in the excerpt. So what you're looking at is a picture of a walnut, and then right next to it is a picture of the brain. And we show that picture, and we show that in our culture, we understood that those fruits and vegetables that have similar shapes to the organs are actually good for those organs. We've cataloged that for thousands of years, and we know the effects of these, fruits and vegetables upon our system. So we show the picture, but then we also read the document. And it just basically says, we've recognized that connection for thousands of years, and today, scientists who are starting to write about this more, they have delineated what we've been teaching for thousands of years that are carved in stone in ancient tombs and temples, and written on papyri in ancient Kemet. We're the first people to write mathematical papyri, medical papyrus, medical instructions about internal surgery and so forth, thousands of years ago. But Europeans are starting to, take this information down and, of course, act as though they came up with the information. But it talks about walnuts, how they're a good source, not just of protein, but omega-6 fatty acids, which are good for brain development. They're considered a brain superfood. It's good for depression, poor concentration, learning disabilities, memory loss, ADHD, hyperactivity, sleep disorders, and cardiovascular health, and a number of different things. But walnuts, in the shape of the brain, are actually great brain foods. So when people see that, and we show them, hey, this is what we mean when we're talking about, in your treatment plan, the cultural spiritual domain. There's never been a time when I've shown this to any client, whether they were schizophrenic, or whether they had bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, or major depressive disorder, schizoaffective disorder, whatever their condition was. This is one of the first things that I would just show them. I'll just give them a copy of the journals as a gift to them. Well, this is a journal. This is what this is one of the things that we give our people, just so you have some information about health, about culture, things that can possibly help you. If it can't help you, then that's fine. You can let somebody else have it in your family. This is free, and we just give it to them. But then we show them some things. When we show them the piece on the walnuts about the health, they're always floored by that, because they see automatically that the walnuts look just like a brain. Even when you take the shell off, the walnut has 2 hemispheres just like the brain. And then they find that it's a super brain food. But then we emphasize the fact that this is part of our culture. We've been teaching this for thousands of years. And it's something that they can go to any local grocery store. It's very inexpensive, and it's something that can help them. So now they have information that tangibly can do something for them in a positive way physiologically, help with depression, poor concentration, learning disabilities. It's a super brain food. It can also help with cardiovascular health and bone health and so forth. And once they see that, and they say, now this is an example of the cultural spiritual domain. This is what we mean by cultural. We don't mean that we're going to try to force you to embrace a religion. We're going to try to force you into some spiritual path or anything like that. In our culture, when we talk about cultural spiritual, and we're talking about this in your treatment plan, we're just talking about giving you this kind of information on a periodic basis. And they're very thankful, they're very excited about it, and they are interested now in the cultural spiritual domain, or the cultural domain, or however it's labeled on the treatment plan. So that's just a quick intervention. Now let's get into a more extensive intervention. And before that, did anybody have any questions on that? So we're basically, talking about the inchin and the rationale for culture and so forth that we went over, that's for the clinician. When we're going to see the client, or when the client is coming to see us, the first thing we do when we have to sit down and work on their treatment plan, and we're going through these different things, these different domains, and we go through the domains that we normally deal with, once we get to the cultural spiritual domain, and they say, well, what is that? Then we can give them the information. So I typically will show them the journal, show them the piece on the walnuts or something else in the journal, and explain it briefly and say, this is what we mean about the cultural spiritual domain, and we'll just periodically give you information like this that can help you. And you can just see if it helps you, and if it does, that's good. And they, without exception, are open to that kind of information. So let's look at, if you look in the excerpt section, and it will be on page, I believe it's page 17. If you go to page 17, on that link, the Nkwamua excerpts link that we put on the bottom of the chat, you'll see this symbol. And by the way, now this isn't in the excerpt chat, but that's a picture. The female is Queen T, and the male is the king, the Per-A, or so-called Pharaoh, Amenhotep III. And these are the grandmother and grandfather of Tutankhamen, who is often called King Tut. Now, of course, it shows them as black people, with brown skin, afros, and so forth. But these are his grandparents, right? Then we also show another picture of Queen T, and a picture of sort of a well-known R&B artist, Kanye Doss, just to show that, and sister from America, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person in America, still looks like the Queen T from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, the grandmother of King Tutankhamen, King Tut, thousands of years later. She lived about 3,300 years ago, between 3,300 and 3,400 years ago, and one of our sisters still looks almost exactly like her today. So even though they talk about us being mixed and we'll never know who we are, that's totally inaccurate. We have various means to find out what ancestral groups we're connected to, inclusive of DNA studies and so forth. So that's just another thing that we show them that helps them to buy into the fact that culture is valuable and interesting. So if you look at this section, the Shea War and Shea, this symbol here, that's page 17. Now here's a sample of an intervention. Your client comes in, sits down, or you go to the client's house or the school or the hospital where they are, wherever your client is. They may be in jail, or they may be in a psychiatric hospital. Wherever the client is, you're going to do an intervention. You may have already went over the domains for the new treatment plan, or you're updating an expired treatment plan, or you may be doing that now, you may have done that in the past, but you're going to do an intervention. So maybe you've talked about various things like the housing issues, or if they were having legal issues, things that you normally talk about and address in the different domains. But before you leave, you say, okay, you want to give them something in the cultural spiritual domain. So say, oh, before I leave, I want to show you this piece right here. So Shea War and Shea, and they, of course, they know nothing about this. So Shea War and Shea is a symbol from the Akan people of West Africa, Afuraitkaitnit, Adekyere symbol. That symbol, Shea War and Shea, Shea means to burn, Wo means you, and Nshe means not burn. So the proverb associated with that symbol is, they try to burn you and you do not burn. So it represents indestructibility, someone who is unburnable. And that means it represents the nature of the spirit of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. Our nature is unburnable or indestructible. It reminds us of that. So every time you see that symbol, you're reminded of your resilience, of your indestructibility. So that symbol, we'll just read the paragraph up under it. I'll let them read it, or if they're not comfortable reading it, or if they may not be able to read, I'll just read that one paragraph. The identical symbol, Shewo and She, defines the enduring quality of the spirit of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African black people. The spirit of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people is part of the great spirit of the Supreme Being, which qualifies it as immortal, indestructible, or unburnable, as the identical symbol conveys. That which is unburnable, indestructible, is unyielding, uncompromising. Inherent in these attributes is the reality that such a spirit exists for a purpose, a function. Your spirit wouldn't be indestructible if there was no purpose for it, right? Okay, so such a spirit does not come into being only to be destroyed in the face of adversity. Shewo and She thus speaks to the ability of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Africans to overcome any obstacles placed before us. That's what the symbol, every time you think of the symbol, it reminds you you're indestructible and you do have the capacity to overcome any obstacles that have been placed before you, because your ancestresses and ancestors have done that. Okay, so far from being an idealized statement of self-worth, Shewo and She is a functional reality as it relates to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit African spirit. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit in America are a manifestation of this reality. We are descendant of those who survived murder, rape, enslavement, torture, and war. We're descendants of people who have survived that. Those who survived and revolted against enslavement and other forms of racism are those whose unburnable blood runs through our veins. We only need to recall, reclaim, and restore this spiritually transmitted inheritance. So, you just read that to them and show them that symbol. And then you ask them a question. So, it means unburnable. That's our nature. This is an ancient symbol from ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, our ancestresses and ancestors, and we have always understood that we have within us the capacity to overcome anything, right? That's an ancient symbol. Then you ask the consumer, have you ever been in a situation where you thought that you would just never be able to make it, and then at some point, you don't know where it came from, but you were able to decide and generate the energy and dig down deep and say, I'm going to overcome this situation. You did overcome the situation. And all of our people have had some kind of experience. If they can't recall something right away, you can talk to them. Just the fact that they're at an agency receiving services from you as a clinician, that's evidence of the fact that they're resilient, because there are other people who have died through the process that they're going through. They didn't overcome, they weren't trying to overcome that obstacle, they just gave up. The fact that they're sitting in front of you, even though they may think, well, I'm weak because I'm receiving mental health services, or I'm weak because I'm receiving some other services, the fact that they are resilient enough to decide that they want to seek some help, or they're attending some session, even if they were forced, the fact that they're engaged in the process means that they're trying to overcome an obstacle which other people succumb to. Some of our people who were brought and enslaved, they died within days, within weeks, within months. We're descended from the people who survived. Some of our people didn't survive. We're descended from the ones who actually survived the murder, survived the torture, survived the rape, survived the beatings. They were able to be resilient enough to have children and raise their children up, or if their children were taken away from them, raise somebody else's children up so that they could have children. And we're descended from the ones who actually made it. So it's actually in our blood to be able to survive any obstacle. If our ancestresses and ancestors could survive torture and rape and dismemberment and dislocation from their home thousands of miles away, and their children being taken from them, but they still survive, and their blood is in our veins, this is not something that's, abstract. It's real. So you can ask them, if they don't have a specific example, you could provide an example from your own life, or you can give them an example of the fact that they're actually in front of you. That shows Shewo and She, their indestructible, unburnable nature. But most of them, at some point, they'll give you an example. They'll tell you they were caught up in a situation, they thought they would never make it, they didn't know what to do, but at some point they decided they were going to have to push forward and move on. And they did, and that's why they're still alive right now. Now once they give you that information, then you show them what you just experienced, or that experience you just shared, is actually a confirmation of this ancient ancestral wisdom. You're actually living out. You never heard about this ancient ancestral wisdom before. You haven't read books about Africa or studied anything like that. You're just going based on your innate instinct. You already connect. You live out these principles because you're an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person, and this is innate within us. It's born within us, and you just proved it. I showed you the ancestral wisdom and what it actually means in the symbol, and you just gave me an example from your life that bears that out. So what you just did was you facilitated the client's self-discovery of these ancient ancestral values. And then you underscored the parallels between the ancient values and their life experience. So you gave them an analysis, which is the first part of the process. Analysis of ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral values. That was the seeding. Then the rooting, the facilitation of client self-discovery of innately held root values. And you asked them if they had an experience, and they gave you their own experience. You didn't give them an experience, they gave you their own, or you facilitated their self-discovery of that experience. And then the third part is you underscored the identity of the client's innately held root values with ancient ancestral values. So you're showing our people that not only did they connect with the values, but you're showing that we have an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit spirit, and our values are rooted in that spirit and programmed, coded in our spirit, in our DNA, physical and spiritual. The next piece is, it says, realization of the root ancestral values as a direct genetic inheritance, inborn and indestructible. So it shows that the reason why they had this instinct to operate in that certain way, at first they went on their conditionings, the way they had been conditioned by the society. I'm not going to be able to make it. But when their instinct kicked in, their innately held ancestral values kicked in, then they kicked that part to the side, the conditioning to the side, and they went on their inherited, indestructible, inborn values. That's a realization, okay? And that's a flowering of these principles. And then the last piece is harvesting. Once they recognize that they have these values, they were able to utilize that ancient ancestral value that they tapped into instinctively and to overcome a specific obstacle. Now your job as a clinician is to show how that is not just a happenstance, it's inborn, it's innate, but it's actually a skill. And once they recognize that it's not a happenstance, but it's actually a skill, skills can be transferred, they can be made adaptable to other aspects of life. So once they understand that it's a skill, then you show them the adaptability to other aspects of their lives so they can apply that skill to overcome other obstacles in life. And that's why the last part says, harvesting, adaptability of root ancient values to address present life circumstances inclusive of racism. So we showed previously in the other document just a list of things that we can associate with racism because we know it exists and we know it impacts us. So once you understand that, and you understand you have root ancestral values that actually can be transformed, used as instruments, as skills to overcome obstacles, then you can transform that to another aspect of life, to overcome the racism that's being shot at you every day. So just like our ancestresses and ancestors overcame the racism to the extent that we didn't become free because there was an emancipation proclamation. We became free because some of our ancestresses and ancestors had that resilience to the point that they armed themselves, they killed the slave master, killed the slave master's wife, children, staff, burned down plantations, waged war, escaped, set up independent sovereign nations. For example, in Dismal Swamp in Virginia, there were over 1,000 people, 2,000 people who had escaped from plantations and set up shop in that region, and they were defending their independent nation. We have a picture in the journal. Let me show you a picture. An artist's rendition of one of the warriors, one of the Okofo in Dismal Swamp. And that's on page 20. He's armed, patrolling Dismal Swamp in Virginia and North Carolina. Right, so we waged war against the whites and their offspring. We became independent, just like Haitians did that in Haiti, waged a war of independence and overthrew the French. You had Maroons in Jamaica and other places waging war against the British and others. You had the Quilombos down in South America and Brazil, Palmares waging war against the Europeans, established independent settlements. In North America, some of our people did the same thing. We waged war against the slave master, burned down plantations, killed them, escaped and set up independent sovereign nations, and lived for generations free in our independent sovereign nations. And then some of our people go back and rescue other people and liberate them from plantations. Because of those things happening on a regular basis throughout the southeastern United States and other parts of the United States, at that time it wasn't, the full United States, in the colonies, the Europeans decided that they had to stop the enslavement process because we forced it. We forced abolition. Abolition wasn't about some benevolent whites saying that this was inhuman. It was about the fact that we started killing them, and they realized that if we continued, we would take over and they would be exterminated. So they wanted to continue to control America, so they had to take another route. So they moved in the direction of abolition because we forced abolition. That was us. If we didn't force it, we would be enslaved right now. But because we forced the issue, they had to stop it, because in reality we stopped it. But then, of course, at the same time, they began to move in a direction of trying to enslave us mentally. So they began to allow us to, quote unquote, read what they want us to read. So they started a whole new process of psychological enslavement, and that's but that's another issue that we address in these kind of sessions. So we actually went through the whole 5-step process. We did the analysis. We just showed them the ancestral wisdom. What does Shewo and She mean? Unburnable, indestructible, that's our nature. That's who we are as a people. We're resilient and we can overcome any obstacle. This is a value that we've had for thousands of years. Then you facilitate the client's self-discovery of those ancestral values, and they will give you experiences in their life about how they manifested these values innately, not because they read them, but because it's within them. And then you underscore the parallel between the ancient ancestral Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit values and the client's innately held values. And then you show them that the realization that these values are inherent, they are inherited, they are inborn. These are positive, inherited cultural values that nobody can take away from them. You don't get them because you read them from a book. You get them because you inherited them via blood from your direct ancestresses and ancestors, not only the ones who were enslaved and freed themselves, but your ancestresses and ancestors who established civilization on Earth and were the first people to walk around in the world thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, and have transferred these values on a regular basis. And then you show adaptability, how these values can be fashioned as skills skills being a tool to transfer these values from one aspect of life to the other so that they can enhance their lives. That's an intervention. And we also show people how to effectively capture these interventions in progress notes, treatment plans, monthly progress reports, and so forth, so that you can make sure that these interventions are captured for funding purposes, for billing purposes. And that's part of the training as well. So does anybody have any questions on that process? All right, so we, okay, let's see. So this is how we utilize the information. I'll give a copy of the journal to each one of my clients. When we go in, we may just use one page. That Shea and Shea piece, that was just one page. Once you start talking about that information, it may turn into a half an hour or 45-minute discussion because they have a number of examples. It begins to open their mind and they start focusing on a number of different things. That's an intervention. It's an effective intervention. It reorients the worldview and the mindset of our people back to what is natural for us, what is normal for us, what is orderly for us. The piece on the walnuts, the natural health, just showing that one page is an intervention because you can give them the information, you can show them how it can be beneficial to them in a tangible way. Every time you leave them, you have given them something that can enhance them physically, enhance them spiritually from the root of culture, so they know that this is not something that's being forced on them, but you're just awakening something that's within them, that's innate, that's indestructible, that's inborn. So what we do is we have these sessions to train human service professionals. We have the final piece is showing them how to, or showing you how to draft progress notes and so forth. We do have hard copies of the journal that we sell. The first issue is out. If you look on Sankofadwuma, the link that says nhoma publications, you can order the publications through there. We typically, there are some organizations who might want to purchase the journals for their therapists and community support workers and case managers to give to clients. Some organizations don't want to spend the kind of money, but it doesn't matter because if you're an independent contractor and you're billing for services, what happens is, and you'll see, we talked about in the email about increasing revenue while enhancing outcomes. We just talked about how you enhance outcomes with your clients. So you'll notice as you're dealing with your clients, dealing with your consumers, that your outcomes are going to be much higher because you're connecting with them on another level. You're not just trying to move them through some arbitrary treatment plan just to make sure you get your billing or make sure the agency generates revenue. What you're doing is you're actually enhancing the healing process because you're approaching the whole process from a whole life perspective, physical soundness, spiritual soundness, rooted in culture. And what happens is, because you're dealing with that, maybe you used to work with them on emotional issues, legal issues, housing issues, education, and so forth. What happens now is you have an additional domain. So many people, they continue to bill for the domains that they normally will work in, but now they have additional billing hours because they're working in a domain and giving information that they never gave before. So some people, they're billing with their clients an additional unit, additional 2 units, additional 3 units every time they see the client. So now if they had 20 clients and they bill an additional 15 minutes per client per week in the cultural domain, then within a month's time, that's an additional hour. 20 clients, you're billing an additional 20 hours a month and generating an additional 20 hours of billing, of revenue for yourself as well as for the agency, and you're enhancing outcomes at the same time. You're not just figuring out a scheme to increase revenue. There's a process of enhancing the outcomes for your clients. in reality, the goal is to, especially with regard to mental health, is to get these consumers and clients in a place where they don't need mental health services anymore. That's really the goal. It's not to keep them trapped in some, core service agency so they just continue to generate money for the agency. The goal for many of them, is to get them to a point where they don't need mental health services. And you're able to help enhance that recovery through this process. At the same time, you also can enhance or increase revenue. And if you own an organization, you can train I can train your clinicians, or you can train your clinicians to utilize the cultural spiritual domain, and they can begin billing additional hours, and that'll be an exponential increase in revenue for the agency as well as for each one of the, for the clinicians. Okay. Let me see. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right. So what we do is you can purchase the hard copy version of the journal. I typically give a copy to each one of my clients, as I said. Sometimes organizations will purchase them. Sometimes they won't. But even if they don't, you get one journal to give to your client, but that journal has a number, like 6 different sections. Each one of those sections is an intervention in and of itself. Each one of those sections can be a half-an-hour intervention or more. So you could get, out of one journal, one $8 journal, you could get 7, 8, 9 hours of interventions from that journal. So you'll generate an additional 7, 8, or 9 hours of billing from one $8 journal. So even if your organization isn't interested in, upfront purchasing journals for the cultural spiritual domain because they've never seen, how it could work, and they're uneasy about that, you can do it yourself. You can purchase the journals from us. You can also purchase the ebook version. That's on the website as well. And let me give you the 2 websites. You can get, because what the Sankofadwuma website does is directs you, it has a link to the nhoma journal website. Okay. So what I just posted is nhoma.com. That's the name of the journal is nhoma. And of course there's a link to nhoma on the Sankofadwuma website. That's where the excerpts are on both sites. So you can go directly to the nhoma site. You can download that issue of the journal. It's a $5 ebook, and the system automatically generates a access code, and then you plug the access code in and you can read the journal online, similar to like if you purchase something on Google Books and then they have the book online for you to read. You can do it that way. That's a $5 ebook, or you can purchase the hard copy version. It's $8 plus shipping, and then we ship them out. If you're in DC, we're in DC right now, so we can actually probably deliver some. But either way, we ship, no matter where you are. So that's how that works. So any questions about any of the information, you can always download those documents. If you have any questions for us, let me put the email address up. Okay, Sankofadwuma at sankofadwuma.com. And if you have any questions about the process, if you have more questions about how to conduct interventions with consumers, what's the best way, or if you're stuck on something, you can let us know. But it's very simple. The journal is like an unofficial curriculum with your consumer. You don't have to be an expert. Your consumers, of course, don't have to know anything about the culture. For example, as soon as you open it up and show them the piece on walnuts, they get excited. As soon as you show them some of the pictures of ancient Kemet, or the number system being created by our people, that just opens them up to all kinds of possibilities. And then you go through just different aspects. You can talk. There's a piece on melanin, which we talked about but that piece is actually in the journal. There's a 7-step decision-making process in the journal. There are other pictures and other things in the journal. So any one of those pages, you can just, that's an intervention in and of itself. And it's basically a curriculum. You can learn along with the consumer. You don't have to be an expert. You can read that 1 page or 2 pages, read it to them, and you all can discuss it. Even if it's brand new to you, it's no different than if you went on the internet and saw a news story about some new fruit or vegetable that's good for cancer or something, and you printed it out and took it to your consumer and said, I found this information about cancer or high blood pressure, I wanted to share it with you. It's no different here, except of course you would have the journal and you have studied some information, but you can go along, just go page by page with them, 1 or 2 pages, depending on how you feel they, how much they can handle. Usually just one of those sections, they can handle it. You read along with them or give it to them to read, and you talk about that information. Go through those steps, those 5 steps, and it's very fluid. You give them the information, they like the information. You ask them if they have had some experience and to share their experience that's related to that kind of information. They share it. You show them that, you just underscore the parallel between their life experience and the ancient wisdom they just studied, so they can see there's a direct connection. And then you can talk about some things to show that, our ancestresses and ancestors have manifested this, and the reason why you have it instinctively is because it's inborn. And we have numerous positive inherited cultural values that are within us that we need to unearth, and they can actually solve all of our problems. We don't need to go outside of ourselves to anyone for any problem to be solved. We have within ourselves and our own innately inherited positive cultural values everything we need to solve every problem that we have now or any problem that could present itself in the future. We have that kind of innovative capacity. And then you can show them how the skills that they use to overcome certain obstacles, they can be honed as skills, refined as skills, and transferred to other areas of life. And it's very fluid, it's very instinctive, and you'll notice right away how empowering it is for the clients and how it enhances their recovery. So if there are any other questions, what agencies in DC or elsewhere that you know of that embraces this type of Afuraka-centered intervention? It's usually people inside the organizations. So it's not often, there are a couple of agencies in DC that have, like, they'll say they approach things from a cultural basis. Like, for example, RAP Incorporated, Regional Addiction Prevention, I believe is the acronym. So they deal with inpatient drug treatment, and on their website you'll see they have the Nguzo Saba. They talk about health, in a holistic fashion, and they talk about culture, and they mention Chancellor Williams and things like that. So there are a couple of agencies that have a sort of an orientation, not a full orientation, but they have a, sort of an orientation. But it's usually people who have gone to those organizations and are independent contractors or therapists, case managers, community support workers, psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists who are in the organizations who are embracing that kind of information. They may be the clinical director or a clinical manager or a clinical supervisor, and they are interested, and once they get the information, they share it with their team. With their team leads, the people who are under them, the managers, the supervisors, and then they share with their line staff. So, but I can check out some other agencies. I can send you an email of some of the agencies that I find that are open to that kind of information. Okay, let me just check if there's anything else. Nope. Okay, so Medase, thank you for checking us out. It's about 9:19, so we're going to stop it here, end it here. But if you have any questions, just email us, sankofadwuma@sankofadwuma.com. Check out the journal, see how you like it. You can also share the information with other people, even if they're not, clinicians and so forth. But you can share the information with family and friends, or people who just may need the information. They may want to check out the journal, get some information they never had before, and they may share it with their children. Usually that's what they do at some point, or people that they're close to. They'll end up saying, hey, I got some information I've never seen before. So incrementally it'll begin to seep in. So again, Medase for checking us out, and we will update you. Keep connected with us on the Sankofadwuma page on Facebook, because the next time we have a session, or if we're in a city in your region doing some presentations, we'll give you an update. Okay, Medase. Thank you for coming out.